Today is March 23rd, 2023. My name is Joe Todd. This is an interview with John Fusselman in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Sir, where were you born?
Bartlesville, Oklahoma.
Okay. When's your birthday?
April the 12th, 1935.
1935. Who is your father?
Ray Fusselman.
And your mother?
Or Blanche Fusselman.
What was her maiden name?
Watkins.
Watkins. Did you go through school in Bartlesville?
Yes, I did.
What year did you graduate?
1953.
1953. From College High?
College High.
Where did you go to elementary school?
I went to, where did I go?
Yes.
Horace Mann.
Horace Mann. Now, who is your favorite teacher?
Well, a person I called Mrs. Mester.
Mrs. Lester.
Mrs. Mester.
Why was she your favorite?
She was just like a guardian angel.
Mm-hmm.
And at recess, she gave me the free milk.
Now, you said she was like the old school marm?
Yes, like the old school marm, very quiet, hovering over each of the students, didn't show favorites. She just loved everybody, and it seemed like everybody loved her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Where did you live in those days?
Well, I lived at 1208 Armstrong, the house in which I was born, next door to 1212.
Mm-hmm.
And do you want all the places I've lived?
Yes.
I lived at 306 South Creek. I lived in on Santa Fe. I'm not sure the street number because it was so far back, but it was close to the old Robertson's grocery store out by the Rita Pump. And I lived at in Skytook when my dad moved to Skytook, and of course I've lived in Owasso. I've lived in Colorado Springs going to college. I've lived in North Kansas City, Missouri going to the seminary.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in Claremore, Oklahoma when I taught at Oklahoma Military Academy.
Mm-hmm.
And I lived quite a few places, but I'm only 25 yards from the place I was born right now.
As a boy, what chores did you do around the house?
Well, it seemed like I did everything my sisters didn't want to do. Of course, I was the youngest of three children, and they were very kind and generous to me, but I did wash dishes, I emptied the trash, I swept the floor, and that was only justifiable because I messed up all of them. I mowed the yard as best I could. We didn't have all the power mowers we had then, we just had push mowers, and I still have the original push mower. But I did what every youngster at that time was expected to do because it was during a pretty tough financial time.
Yes. How did the Depression affect you and your family?
Well, the Depression, of course, was back before I was born, but my father always worked at a grocery store of some kind. He was a born grocer, I guess you'd say. He had a couple of partners earlier in his life, and he had a couple of stores of his own, and so we were well aware of the difficulty of getting certain grocery items and the limitations. In fact, I remember going through the time period where you had to have certificates to buy certain things. And
these are ration stamps?
Ration stamps, and I know that The only way I got an allowance at that time was to save the grease and pick up grease at different places. Anybody that'd give me grease would put in a can, we'd take it to a grocery store like Lennon and Waller there by Horace Mann and sell it, and that would be our Saturday money. And the Depression was pretty tough back then, but I was always provided for. That's something I can look back on and say that no matter how difficult it was, my dad always worked to make sure his family was taken care of.
You said he was a grocer?
He's a grocerman.
Okay. Now, why'd you move around so much?
Well, because he started out at the Buy Right Grocery in downtown Bartlesville, and he was offered a couple of opportunities. The Landers brothers offered him a job of managing the Landers store here in Bartlesville, and Mr. Doty, who at that time was a president or vice president of the Union Bank, he brought the first gigantic grocery store in Oklahoma to Bartlesville, and it was called Food Town. And my dad was hired as manager of Food Town. And that I remember very well because that's where I got my first grocery job, was selling donuts on Saturday out of the donut machine. That's back when there weren't rules on limitations of working. If you had an opportunity to work, you took it.
Now, was this at Food Town?
At Food Town, yeah.
Okay.
And
where was Food Town located?
it was where the old Enterprise building was, but now a bank is in there.
Yes.
And it's right across from Curtis Sporting Goods east.
Yes, okay.
That corner, big lot.
Yes.
And the Bureau of Mines was right next door to it. And it was the largest grocery store in Oklahoma at that time. And
Now, what did you do? You said you sold donuts.
yeah, I ran the donut machine. You just made sure it had the grease in it and the product in it, and you punched buttons or levers, and it dropped the donuts in the grease, and then you'd turn them over and take them out. And I sold them by the dozen there.
What was the price of a dozen donuts?
At that time, it was a nickel.
A nickel.
And I remember that the worst trouble I got into was on the donut machine, because early one Saturday morning, some gentleman informed me that 13 was a dozen. And I thought, oh gosh, I've been cheating everybody. So throughout the day, I gave 13 as a dozen. And my dad walked by, and I was counting out donuts. I counted 13 and sold them. Afterwards, he said, how many donuts did you give him? I said, 13 for a dozen. And he said, there's only 12 in a dozen. And I thought, oh, busted. And of course, at that point, I was released for the rest of the day because the loss had been quite significant for that day, just a donut extra, and I never lived that down. Every time I think of the movie The Dirty Dozen, I think of my dozen donuts that I gave as 13. But that was the start of my grocery career, and that was really the growth of my father's career. After that, he built up at different stores, and he ended up owning 2 stores in Bartlesville. And
Which stores did he own?
he owned Ray's Corner Market, which was directly opposite of the depot downtown. And that was behind the Blatt's Bar. And the Victory Inn was the place we always ate the pie and everything, because Grace Andrews owned that, and she owned the building. And he leased the building from her. And
Where was that building?
Huh?
Where was that building?
It was right across the street from the depot.
Okay.
On that corner, and it's the one that has the cut-off corner.
Yes, okay.
And it's still there standing the same way. And the individual that they referred to as Smiley James lived across the street. He had his appointment. He had a bus station and a restaurant there. And then there was a feed store from a vacant lot right next, and that's where I used to play when I wasn't working. But that was Ray's Corner Market. And then my dad ended up buying Mr. Cunningham's location down in front of the stadium. And there was a restaurant on the corner and a grocery store there, and it was called Ray's Drive-In.
That was the baseball stadium downtown?
Yeah, the downtown Dungeness
Yeah,
Stadium, right. And that was, we had that for a long time. And then he entered into partnership with Ernest Bowersock of Dewey, and they had shared groceries at different places. But he spent his entire life in Bartlesville in the grocery business until he got a chance to go to manage a store in Skytook, and that he went down there. He took over Thompson's Grocery in Skytook after I left to go to the military.
Okay. I'd like to ask, when you were in high school, what did you do in the summertime when you were not in school?
Well, we would go to my friend's place in Pawhuska. He had a couple of Indian allotment buildings over there, and we would ride horses and go through. And his aunts and his uncles were Orban and Wayne Garrett, the calf roper and bronc rider. And we would go over to his ranch, and it was Chuck's ranch, Chuck McDougan, and he and I were best friends. And we would go over to his ranch and ride horses and fish and camp and all that on his property. And if we weren't over there, then if a carnival came to town down by the Phillips chemical plant, there they used to have them all the time down there, we'd spend our time down there doing what everybody else did. And ours was just a pretty normal childhood. We really spent a lot of time at Johnson's Drive-In. That's now out, I think it's a Sonic now. But the Johnson's Drive-In was where we all met on all occasions out of high school. And that's where I learned to like crackers and milk.
Yes. Now, was Zesto's here at that time? Zesto's is on the west side of town on Frank Phillips. Zesto's Drive-In.
Zesto's.
Yes.
Yeah, that became Tasty Freeze.
Yeah.
Sure did. I remember that. And ultimately that signaled for me the first time that I came in contact, it was going to have a real effect on my life, because at one time I owned a Tasty Freeze, the Tasty Freeze in Claremore.
Yeah.
And it was because of my contact with the people that operated the Zesto and became Tasty Freeze.
Now, did you go to Santa Pool?
Oh, Santa Pool, yeah. I remember Mr. Custer in Santa Pool. That was quite a place.
Tell me about Santa Pool.
Well, you know, he never did, in my opinion, get the benefit of everything that he contributed to the city. I'm almost sure, I think he developed the process of creating the Santa Pool, sanitizing the Santa Pool. And I know that the one thing we always liked to do that just really drove him crazy, and he would just run out and run us away, we'd get underneath the big water coming down into the pool and let it just almost drown us. Well, we weren't supposed to do that, because that was the chemicals and water mixed together coming in. And I remember him very well because I had him in College High. And he was a great guy. He really was.
What did he teach at College High?
He taught a science class of some kind. I never was very good at that because I went the general business.
Yeah. Now, he was a coach too, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was a coach. Yeah, he was. He was a great coach. He never got to coach me, but because I never went out for any of the sports that he had. Burl Stidham was the one I was related to, and Mr. Ricketts, and of course I wasn't on the swim team, so I didn't have much to do with Mr. Newman, except he taught me how to drive, and I taught him how to duck his head when I passed somebody. But I remember Earl Newman. He was quite a guy too.
Yes.
And, you know, I just, if I tried to list my favorite teachers, it would be really hard to do because back then they were all fantastic. I mean, I don't know of any of them except one that I had problems with. And the only reason I had a problem with this teacher was that I said something or did something and she bent me over the desk and whipped me and didn't tell me why. You know, and I always avoided her after that. But I've always not mentioned her name because the act of what she did was like beating me. That was her name, you know. She beat me like a blank. And it took me a couple, 3 weeks to mention that to my folks. And I got another one when I got home.
Now, they named Custer Stadium after Coach Custer, didn't they?
Yes, it was. I think it was Custer Stadium, and I think now maybe it's Custer Field and some other stadium.
Yeah.
But you know, I always get upset when I read about these name changes on different memorials to people. If you're going to memorialize them, leave it alone.
Yes.
There's something else out there you can name
Yes.
after the new person.
Yes.
And of course, it might have been different if somebody wanted to name it after me. I might say, "Oh, great, go ahead," you know. But
White Rose Cemetery.
White Rose Cemetery. I remember it well. Most of my relatives are buried at White Rose. My grandpa and grandma are buried in the mausoleum. And
What are their names?
John and Minner Watkins.
Okay.
And my grandpa had a lot to do with building the mausoleum. And I have an aunt who is buried out in the other parts of the cemetery, who told me that I was told she was going to be a mausoleum story because she was a 20-year in-charge nurse at Memorial Hospital on the night shift, and she was responsible for bringing into this world hundreds of babies, and as I understand it, all of the Tate boys. She helped with those births.
Tell me about the mausoleum.
Well, it always scared me to death because, you know, I didn't go, I had a key and I still have a key, but I avoided mainly because of the death. I would decorate once a year. And I just, I thought it was a beautiful place, and of course, all of the Indian chiefs that I was aware of at that time are buried there. And after I found out how much my grandpa had to do with the casting and the marbling and everything, that made a difference. And I understand that on the anniversary of the White Rose, that I've been asked to be my grandpa in a 5-minute speech introducing himself to the people there. And I've learned a lot about my grandpa from that and from the person who was responsible for the mausoleum, Mr. Bryant. And one thing I've not been able to find out about the White Rose Cemetery and Mr. Bryant is where that name Sonny Jim came from. That is a mystery. In fact, the one person who I was convinced could tell me was my sister, because he and she were best of friends when he would come out to the farm to visit. She would always meet his car. He never drove onto the property. He stayed in the road. And he was always friendly. And the first thing that they exchanged was he would give her a piece of gum because she would walk up and hold out her hand. My other sister wouldn't go near him because that was it. And
Now, this is Mr. Bryant?
Mr. Bryant,
That's
yeah.
the Sonny Jim. That's
Sonny Jim, that's who it was, Sonny Jim.
so they call him Sonny Jim.
Sonny Jim Bryant.
Okay.
And of course, on the letter I have for him, it lists Hugh Bryant. But my sister only knew him as Sonny Jim. My grandpa called him Sonny Jim. And where this name Sonny Jim came from, I've never been able to find out. And
Now, he's the one that actually built the mausoleum?
yeah, well, he's the one that provided the marble for the mausoleum and was responsible for it being built.
Where'd the marble come from?
You know, I don't know to this day. I don't have any idea where it
Now,
came
you
from.
mentioned how they got the marble to the cemetery.
Yes,
How
on
did
my grandpa's wagon, he had two big mules called Kit and Kate. And I remember Kit and Kate well because they were gigantic mules. You know, back then you had the donkeys and you had the jacks and everything, but these were donkeys. These were monsters. They were bigger than any horse I ever saw. And they pulled all of his harvest materials and his combines and his wagons and things. And that harvest thing that had the long big strap on it that went in a circle, I don't remember what they called it. But we always had to stay away from that because it was dangerous.
Is that the old shackle rod?
Yeah,
Powerhouse with a shackle rod?
yeah, it had this long rubber strap that went around the wheel and it operated something. Maybe it was the thrasher.
Okay. That's a thrashing machine.
Is that what it is, a
Yes.
thrasher? Okay. And I remember that, and I used to be water boy for that, and I rode old Pat, my grandpa's big horse. But Sonny Jim was, to all the information I have, was the epitome of being a gentleman. And my grandpa always referred to him as Mr. Bryant. And he always referred to my grandpa as Mr. Watkins.
Now, the marble was brought in on the train.
I think that's what it was because he hauled it from the train stop there in Bartlesville to the mausoleum.
Okay.
Now, where it stopped, I don't know. You know, the train ran right past the farm where Grandpa lived, and that's what caused his demise. Was the train came through one day and he was driving the cows across the railroad track and the train hit one of the cows and it landed on him. And he was crippled ever since. But you wouldn't know it by going down to that area now. It's a residential area like you wouldn't believe. And I tell people I used to ride a horse down here. No, you didn't. And I said, that land right there was my dad's grapevines. He raised grapes and they were all imported. And
Where was the farm?
okay, you cross Sand Creek on the bridge, going south, going towards Circle Mountain. Just as soon as you get across the bridge, the farm started there.
Okay.
And it went all the way to Circle Mountain, went all the way down to the road that goes to Circle Mountain, and across on the other side in the pasture land here,
That's southwest of Bartlesville.
southwest of
Yes.
Bartlesville. And there were cement pits down there. And I remember as a kid, my grandpa said, don't ever go down there and don't ride Pat down there. Because the cement pits, some are overcovered with grass and stuff, and they're full of water. And I never knew what that was for. And to this day, I still don't know. But I do know that they were down there, and they may be filled now. I imagine they are.
Yeah.
But the farm was right there in that whole area, and it went all the way to Circle Mountain, and it started at the bottom of Circle Mountain where Circle Mountain School was. And I remember going to Circle Mountain pie suppers up at the school many times. And one of my grandpa's best friends was Sig Lawrence, who lived there in the house next to the school. And there was, now this is something to be worth investigation. I got to thinking about this. There was a gentleman that we call Miller. That's all I knew him by, was Miller. But my sister knew him by another name. And she said, you keep referring to Miller. His name wasn't Miller, his name was Nig. And then I got to thinking, Sig and Nig, there's a correlation there somehow. Somebody has originated those names somewhere in that group of people that lived there. And I just often wondered who really was Sig. And he was a guy that lived in a shack down on Sand Creek, and every meal he'd come up to the house and eat, and then he would go back to his shack. And he was a helper for Grandpa, helped with the butchering of the hogs and stuff like that.
Did you work on the farm?
I was the water boy for the thrashers.
Okay.
And I was also the main churner of the butter because it kept me in the outhouse away from everybody, out from under their feet. And my grandma wanted me churning the butter, so I learned how to churn butter early in life.
What were the main stores in Bartlesville at that time?
Well, there was, in my growing up,
Yes.
I remember the London shop. I remember Martin's, J.C. Penney's, Anthony's. There was the Rexall drug. There was the Blatt's bar. And there was Lander's grocery store. And then there was a hotel behind the Lander's Brother, big hotel. I don't recall what the name of that was. But that was, as I understand it, that was a location that my aunt lost her husband one night in a card game there at that hotel. Shortly after they were married, and I have that story in here. The research and she provided all of it herself before she died. But
What happened to him?
he was shot during the poker game.
What was his name?
I'm sorry, Doug Bixler.
Okay.
It was, his name was Bixler.
Did you know O.C. Baldwin's drugstore?
I sure did. I knew Baldwin's. And my uncle, I can't list you all of the properties, but he was the elevator operator and custodian for most of the stores downtown. And when he died, it was discovered that he owned 7 of the buildings. And the administrator of his estate got rid of them all, and that was, I remember that very well. I had no idea that he was that involved. But one was the Hull's Walgreens there, and then a couple of attorneys on 2nd Street rented their buildings from him and didn't know it. And he did the elevator operating for those buildings.
Now, I've heard about 2nd Street.
Yeah, 2nd Street, the Wee Blue Inn was there. That was that belonged to my uncle's wife and her sister. They were from Arkansas. Then there was the restaurant on the corner. I can't remember her name, but there was Shirley. I always thought it strange that his name was Shirley. He ran a secondhand store there, clothing store on that street. And there was Dunlap's on that street. And next door to my dad's store on Ray's Corner Market. And then on farther down there was the Eagles Hall, which was across the street, and Chuck Larkin lived up there, and as a kid I used to lead him around town. He was blind. And he would give me a quarter for a Saturday's day work, taking him around town. And I remember that very well.
I heard that there were some shady places on 2nd Street that...
Oh yeah, well, I guess so. There was Jack's Bar, and one of my best friends, his dad ran that. And there was Jack's Shack, and there was, of course, gambling and stuff going on in all of them. And there was a lot of drinking, and I know that it wasn't very righteous of me, but I was allowed in Jack's shack to sell newspapers. And I sold the newspapers on the corner, and then I'd go to, if I had any left, I'd go to Jack's shack, and I would normally find the one person who was drunk there, and I sold him a story, and he bought all my papers, and I left, you know. And I would do that 2 or 3 times a week, sell out right there. But that was, I couldn't get the Phillips 66 corner because one of my best friends had it.
Yeah.
But I did have the 2nd Street section.
How many theaters were in Bartlesville?
Well, there was the Rex, the Lyric, the Arrow, the Osage. And I worked at all of them. I worked the concession stands of a couple of them, and I worked tickets at the others. But I remember the premiere at the Osage. I think that was the premiere of Oklahoma. And on the picture of the crowd, I can pick out my aunt and me in the crowd. That was national picture on the premiere of Oklahoma there. But the movies were, you know, it never dawned on me the separation of people in the movies. I accepted it because that was the rules. I was told that was the rules, and I never questioned
The separation of people.
Yeah, that there were certain people had to sit up in the balcony at the back, and other people could sit down in the main part. And it never dawned on me why that separation was there. I always thought that the up in the top at the back was the place to be if you had a date, you know. And yet it was segregated quite heavily during those times. And in fact, there was entrances separate. And it didn't dawn on me until I got older, and then I realized what was going on. And I thought, you know, when I was at Booker T High School teaching, Judge Daugherty in Colorado said he was going to integrate schools, but he didn't integrate the schools, and that was the thing that really upset me. He desegregated the schools, and there's a vast difference between desegregation and integration. And desegregation meant that you'd take the best of this group out and put the worst of this group in, and you desegregated. And that's what, when I first went to Booker T. Washington, I was so impressed with the quality of the kids and their courteousness and their academic abilities that they did not believe themselves to be victims. They were leaders in their community. And I was fortunate enough to be appointed chairman of the English department at Booker T. Washington, and I had earned doctorates in my department.
When were you at Booker T. Washington?
Okay, I went to Booker T. Washington Mr. Mitchell was the athletic director. Mr. Jackson was the math teacher. Mrs. Orm was an English teacher and special ed teacher. And Mrs. Flippo was an English teacher. Dr. Benny Bankston was an English teacher. And Dr. Talley was a humanities teacher. And these were all elegant people. I mean, highly educated. And they were not short of anything. I mean, they brought with them an ability that would shock you today in a school.
Now, were you there in the 50s, 60s, or when?
It was late 60s.
Late 60s.
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to back up.
Okay.
How often would you go to the movies in Bartlesville?
Well, I'd go every Saturday after I'd finished my donut sales, or finish stocking at the store, or just become a nuisance and given my allowance and sent out.
Of course, they had the news of the world at the
Oh yeah, news, 20th Century Fox News, and they had all of these serials. And I remember most of the serials, and I saw most of them at the Lyric Theater. And the Rex Theater was a little dark and dingy theater. It had some good movies, but I didn't go there very much. A friend of mine ran the concession stand there. But the Osage was the premier movie house until the Arrow opened up. And when the Arrow opened up, well, things became competitive between the two. And I've worked at all four of them.
What'd you do?
I was, like I say, I worked in concession, I worked in tickets, I worked as ushers. I was night ticket taker. I'd sell tickets from my position when the girl left, the cage, for people that came in late. And I was just basically in charge of the production. After the movie, I'd go down through and make sure that everything was okay, that there was nobody passed out in the aisle or something, It was just one of those jobs you had that every kid wanted, because you got in the movies free. And I remember a lot of experiences going to the movies. Now I can tell you a true story about a movie I went to and saw and created havoc and got escorted out. Not because of anything bad I did, but because of what my best friend did during the movie.
What happened?
Well, we had gone to the movie to see the movie called The Thing. This was an alien who was big, and it was played by James Arness. And I didn't know it at this time that he was going to be Gunsmoke or anything else. But it was a real mystery, and we were all right on the edge of our seats. Well, my best friend had seen the movie in Kansas City. And he got up to go get some popcorn or something. And I was so intense on the movie that I didn't hear him come back. He came back behind me. And at the exact instant that the guy opened the door and there stood The Thing and went, ooh, like that, he put his hand on my shoulder. That ended the show. And this actually happened. I screamed. And I jumped up. And on the arms of every row down to the front, I jumped screaming. Two ladies passed out in front of me. And I got down, the lights came on, and I was like this, and my friends, four of them, were back there rolling in the aisle, just laughing. And that was the time I had the early morning paper route. Well, needless to say, after we were escorted from the movie, I went to get my papers, and I forced my best friend to go with me on the paper route because I saw The Thing everywhere. But that was that was the kind of fun we had. It wasn't at no time did he think I would react that way. He thought I would just scream and fall down into the aisle. But I did him one better. And that was the talk of our lifetime until we went to Michigan to work on the pipeline together.
Now, in the news of the world, did they show the rise of Hitler, what was going on in Germany?
Yeah, this was just a big deal. Everything, they actually, I thought they held nothing back. I mean, we were well informed of what was going on, but we also, I look at it now that this was, I hate to use the word propaganda, But we had to be informed and prepared for what was taking place, because there were decisions being made that we may not have understood. And I will never forget the President Roosevelt coming on and saying that a state of war exists.
Where were you when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor?
Well, I was at 1015 Oak.
What did you think when you heard about the attack?
Well, I didn't particularly like it, but I didn't see it as affecting me until I realized it did affect me. And that was part of the educational process that we had to go through. You know, we had trick-or-treating that we did all the time. And one of the big places to go was Frank Phillips's house, because they always had a show, a Christmas show or a holiday show of some kind, that was paid for by Frank Phillips.
Did you go to those Christmas shows?
Oh yeah, I went to every one I could.
Who is the entertainment of those shows?
Well, just the current people that we knew back then as our entertainers. We had many local entertainers. We had musicians. We had singers and dancers, and of course they had a lot of the Hollywood stars come in. I think Ben Johnson once came in. I know that at one show I went to, Ronald Reagan was there, and that was before he ran for president. But it was these were the choice places to
Were they
go.
held at the Civic Center?
Yeah, there was some at the Civic Center, but in fact, I guess that's where they were all held, because back then it was built different than it is now. And I remember that when we go to Frank Phillips for trick-or-treats, that his private butler or bodyguard, one, would answer the door and hand out the treats. And he always reminded me of the guy in the movies that threw the discs, because he was Asian. And, you know, that was during the Japanese time. And he was considered a member of the Bartlesville, Oklahoma. And yet he was Asian. And we always talked about, boy, you don't want to cross him.
I think it was Japanese.
Yeah, he was Japanese.
Yes.
But
After the war started, did you help with the scrap metal drives or rubber drives?
oh, we saved everything. I saved rubber bands. In fact, I still may have a roll of rubber bands. We rolled them in balls.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we saved rubber bands, we saved grease, we saved metal. I didn't get to save very much metal because it came through the grocery store, and you know, they had a way to recycle it there. Mm-hmm. And everything was pretty well controlled. Mm-hmm. And rightly so, because it was a disastrous time.
Yes.
And I have a story here that deals with Japan and my cousin, who was in the Philippines. And he was a member of a tank battalion out of Ohio. And he was a member of the Kopandui area. And when he was drafted into the military, they assigned him to the tank battalion from Ohio. and they shipped out to Philippines. And his tank was responsible for keeping the Japanese from coming across the bridge into Bataan. And his was the last free tank before Bataan fell. And he became a prisoner of war at that point.
Did he make the Bataan Death March?
He made the Bataan Death March, and he was put on the death ships, and he was sent to Japan, and he was placed in the Mitsubishi mines. And he was injured and placed in the hospital, and this British doctor took him under his care and was bringing him back to health. And this Japanese doctor decided to take over, and he ran 4 tests on him and killed him.
What was his name?
Les Fusselman.
Les Fusselman.
Actually, not Les, it was Clifford Wayne.
Yeah.
Les was his other cousin.
Yeah.
He's the baseball star
Okay.
that caught Vinegar Ben Mizell for the St. Louis Cardinals. But Clifford Wayne,
Is this Les, the baseball player?
yeah, Les was the baseball
Okay.
player. Yeah,
Clifford
and
is the one that died in Japan.
Clifford Wayne was the one that died in Japan, or actually was murdered in Japan. And they had the trial of the doctor, and he was convicted of the murder and was sentenced to life imprisonment. And General Ridgway commuted his sentence and set him free. And to this day, we have not received the remains of Clifford Wayne. And I have information here in letters from the Corps of Engineers and the people who are in charge of the remains. There's a big meeting in Dallas next month. And of course, I've been invited to it because I had to send my DNA to identify the remains. And they want to return the remains to us. But they have returned 3 separate boxes of remains, and they were rocks and sticks. And my aunt never accepted the payment. And so anyway, they're the ones that operated the Dewey Hotel and lived in Dewey and are buried in the Dewey Cemetery. But Clifford Wayne has not been returned yet. And a very strange thing, I called one of the credit companies, and they transferred me to their office, and it was in Philippines. And this girl and I were talking, and she said, "I know where that cemetery is." And I said, "I wish you'd do me a favor. Would you go over and see if you can find a spot with the name Clifford Wayne Fusselman on it?" I said, "That's where he's supposed to be buried." And she said, "You know, I'm going out that way this weekend with my family. We'll check." And lo and behold, I got a phone call from her. And she told me, she said, I found information on him, but he's not buried there. His name is on the plaque at the entrance to the cemetery. And then I understood, I was told that he was buried in Hawaii. Well, my brother-in-law went to Hawaii, and he's not buried in Hawaii. So his remains are still boxed somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, that's the whole gist of what's happening now. That's why I had to send DNA. And my niece is a big follower of POW rights. And she has taken this over. And she and her bomb dog were the security people at the Tulsa airport. And when they were looking at victims for the 9/11, they sent her to the site with her dog to find remains. And she is a retired Tulsa police officer and was with the bomb corps. And so she is going to that meeting. And I've got the information, everything about that meeting and about where they are on the discovery. And I told him, I said, if we get them back, the remains are going to be buried right next to Mom and Dad at the Dewey Cemetery, along with his big brother, who was also a member of that tank battalion, but he got assigned to Patton's group in Europe and fought in the Battle of the Bulge with that.
Now, did you enlist or were you drafted?
I was a member of the reserve in Bartlesville.
Okay.
And the reserve guy there was one of my best friends. Let me drive his car all the time. And I know it was just to get me to join, but I joined. And it was just one of those situations that a reserve unit got called out for training. And when we went to Fort Riley, Kansas, it never ended for me. At that point, that's when I went into the military and immediately shipped to Fort Benning, Georgia.
Now, when did you join the reserves?
This was when I was still in high school.
Okay. What unit was here in Bartlesville?
I don't remember the unit because I have it written down, but it's been so many years. I do know that when I got to Fort Riley, Kansas, to take basic training, the guy who was in charge of my basic training looked totally familiar to me. And I discovered that he was a twin to the guy who signed me up here in Bartlesville, and I was shipped directly to his group. And he was the only sergeant major in the Army at that time.
Tell me about basic.
Well, it was something that I'd never done before, and I learned a lot, and I survived it. And it was, it's just one of those things that you went through. A lot of marching, a lot of exercise, a lot of target practice, a lot of shooting, being able to take your weapon down apart and put it back together, and learning discipline and going on war games and things. And of course, the war games are another part of my life story. When I went to
After basic, where'd you go?
after basic, I went to I went to Fort Benning, Georgia. I went to what they called Sand Hill. There was Sand Hill main post, and I went to headquarters of the 3rd Division Artillery. And this was an artillery unit here in Bartlesville. I remember that because they had the big weapons. And we trained on a 105. When I got down there, that's what we trained on. I was in the headquarters company of the 3rd Division Artillery. And fortunately, I was placed in a quartermaster corps, and I was left wide open for any job. And the general's driver was a good friend of mine. His name was A.J. Bustamento, and he became a politician in San Antonio. A.J. Bustamento, never will forget him. He recommended to the general that I could be a member of his staff and be what was called his body man. And so one weekend they took me over to the general officer's house and introduced me to the family. And my job was to provide for the family. And I thought, this has got to be the best job in the world, And I was responsible for the general, his uniforms, his medals, everything about the general in his house, and his family.
So you became his valet.
I was his valet. I was his enlisted aide.
What was his name, the general?
Robert H. Booth. Robert Hyman Booth. And he is to be forever known as the general of the First Army area that when Russia secretly restarted their nuclear weapon testing, his team found out about it, and without any permission of any person, he ordered the restart of the United States nuclear testing on his own, and that kept the United States from falling behind. And he was awarded the highest honor, other than the Medal of Honor, because of that job. And he was a little 5-foot-tall general, green eyes, kill you, look at you. But he had a heart of gold, and he was the reason I went to college.
How long were you with the general?
I was with the general almost 3 years.
How long in the Army, active duty?
3 years, 11 months, and 7 days, and about 6 hours.
Then you were discharged?
I was discharged at Fort Benning, Georgia.
When were you discharged?
It was like in 1956 or something, around that time, because I went directly from there to Oklahoma Baptist University, where the general had gotten me a scholarship, an entrance, automatic right there, because he picked up the phone and did the wonders and got me in.
What did you study at OBU?
I studied pre-ministry and English, and that's what I studied that entire time. And I lived above a grocery store right next door to the chapel, where Kenneth Fountain was the teacher supervisor of that off-campus apartment. And Kenneth Fountain was the brother of Pete Fountain, the musician.
Yes.
And I've had such a blessed life with everything that's happened. It just seemed like things intervened at the right time.
Now you said you went to school in Colorado Springs?
Yeah, I did my graduate work down there at Colorado College.
Okay.
And that was, I left Colorado College, and that was after Booker T. Washington. But
What did you teach at Booker T. Washington?
I taught English.
English.
Yeah.
Okay.
I taught English, and I was chairman of the English department. And it was, Bill Bonds was in my department. He was an executive out at Memorial High School.
Now, when did you teach at OMA?
Okay, well now OMA, I'm trying to think because I think it was after I left Cassia Hall. I think I went from Cassia Hall to OMA to Booker T.
Now, what did you teach at OMA?
I taught English and
Okay.
coached wrestling.
Tell me about OMA.
Well, I lived on campus in the barracks. They provided me an apartment there. And I had the brother of the president of the Bank of Oklahoma in my unit, Kurt Liebarger. And the Liebarger family pretty well ran the Bank of Oklahoma at that time. I had Randy Brooks in my group, and Randy Brooks's dad lived in Nichols Hills, Oklahoma City, and bought all the movies that were shown in Oklahoma through his corporation. And I spent time down there visiting them and staying at their house, Jack Brooks, and got to see movies that before they even hit the screens. You know, it was really an amazing thing. And I enjoyed my time there. But when General Smoller left, it became a political situation. And I set the record in Oklahoma on a bass that I caught out of the pond there in front. And at that point, when General Smoller found out about it, that's when he became the big fisherman on the post. And he had 2 sons that went there, and he owned property in Colorado Springs. And that's what made me go to Colorado Springs, was that I was introduced to their families out there. But at Oklahoma Military Academy, I had kids that I've had lifetime friends and relationships with. In fact, Kenneth and Curtis Sutley were there. And Kenneth Sutley was the police officer who is well known for his picture of holding this limp child that was injured in Tulsa and made national headlines. And
Was that Tulsa or was that the Murrah building?
that was the Murrah building.
Yeah, Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City. But see, they went down from Tulsa.
Yeah.
That was all part of it.
Okay.
And the day that happened, I was taking a group of kids from Schulter, Oklahoma,
Where?
Schulter,
Yes,
Oklahoma,
yes, okay.
to Oklahoma City to see a play. And we were passed on the highway by hundreds of cars, police cars and emergency things. And when we got down to OSU, we were in the OSU lounge with the kids eating lunch. And it came across and showed this blast and everything that occurred. And I punched Mr. Beard next to me. I said, you know, we're lucky that something like that could not happen in America. And that did happen in America. It was in
Now, when did you retire?
which time? My retirement was not a voluntary retirement. And no, I wasn't fired. I was injured. And
What happened?
I was injured at Dewey High School. And that started an amazing set of circumstances that I can still say I'm blessed.
How were you injured? What happened?
Well, on a particular day, I had been teaching at Dewey, and teaching 3 hours of English a day, and they needed a teacher to cover the choir room.
Now, is this, when were you at Dewey?
From 2000 to my retirement.
Okay, okay.
And I was sent down there to babysit the kids. I was a substitute teacher in that choir room. And we were showing movies. Well, I left my desk because there was some noise up at the top, and I went up to the top in the choir room, and I sat down there, and it quieted the kids down. And then the movie was over, and I got up to come back down, and you know the steps on a choir loft are about that deep. Well, as I started down, the bell rang. The kids all jumped up. They flipped on the lights. And as I was taking a step on the last step, the 6th grader was sitting at the bottom, and he threw his chair and ran to the door. He was ready to go. And in midair, I tried to sidestep this chair, and I couldn't, and I landed just like this, full body down on the concrete. And I remember this to the minute. I said, thank God I didn't hit my face. And all of a sudden, I felt something grab me at the back. It felt like grab me, pull my head back and slam my face in the concrete. That was the momentum that was following me as I fell. Crushed my nose, my jaw, and I'm laying there bleeding all over the floor. And this little kid who had thrown his chair stopped and looked and screamed and ran to the office to report that I had fallen. And the teachers all came from the other rooms and tried to comfort me and everything. And the principal came over and I told him, I said, I think I'm going in shock. I mean, I was just torn up. Mm-hmm. And so one of the students that I had that was in the Explorer Scouts medical group, he helped me. They put me on an ambulance thing and took me to the hospital. And immediately that started a set of things that has not ended to this day. Still has not ended to this day.
So how has this affected you?
It's completely changed my life.
How has it changed your life?
I couldn't work anymore. When they separated me from Dewey Schools, I was given 3 reasons. And I never could understand why they gave me the 3 reasons.
What were the 3 reasons?
They said, you sued the school. I did not sue the school. The workman's comp sued the school. I had nothing to do with the lawsuit. They were trying to recover what their cost was for the fall. Mm-hmm. And the school was responsible. And the second reason was that they were afraid I'd fall again. And the third reason was that they had hired somebody else. And that was it. Goodbye.
So how has this affected you today?
Well, I'll be honest with you, I still pray for them who had their hand in this thing. And I refused to let it get me down because after I got to where I could do anything, I made a special point to go to Dewey and go in a different person who finally, he went to Pryor.
Now that administrator was the one that gave you the 3 reasons?
Yeah, the last one.
Yes, yes.
But he was, at that time, he was only the principal.
Yes, okay.
But he was promoted to superintendent after the other superintendent left. Paul Smith was the first one that I worked under. A great guy, wonderful person. Just worshiped the ground he walked on. This other one really didn't like me because I carded him at the football game because I didn't know who he was. And Mark Smith was the vice principal, and he was a great guy. And we worked together quite a bit. And then the assistant superintendent, he was a member of the church, Mormon church.
I noticed that you walk with a cane. Is this a result of this accident?
Yes.
So how has this affected you today?
Well, I still walk with a cane.
Yeah.
And I don't go anywhere without it because I still have trouble with my legs. Mm-hmm. And I can show you to this day. You see the swelling of the legs.
Yeah.
And that's an elastic stock.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually have Circades on which are wraps. But because I was just going to the cemetery meeting and going home, I didn't wear the circades.
Yeah.
But these are special shoes that I have to wear. And
Why do you have to wear special shoes?
because of the feet and the swelling in the toes and the feet.
What caused the swelling of the legs?
Well, I guess it's because my body is not getting rid of the water like it should.
Yeah.
And yet, my heart has received a perfect score. My kidneys have received perfect scores. And what they are considering is that it's as a result of the trauma of the fall.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the only fall I've had since 2013. On Christmas Eve this year, I fell again. But I didn't fall, I slipped on ice in my front yard. I made a wrong turn, my feet went out from under me. I had the same reaction. And I fell, and my face right here ended up that far from the brick trim around my house. And I prepared myself for that slam in, you know.
Yeah.
It didn't come. But I couldn't move. And I was wearing a road construction coat that my nephew had given me, which was orange and black, bright. And it was all around me, and I was laying in the snow in front of my house, and cars were going back and forth, back and forth. And I laid there for over an hour, couldn't move. Nobody honked, nobody stopped, nobody said, look, there's a big fat guy laying in the yard. I got frostbite on my fingertips to this day. I crawled over to my porch, and I crawled up on the porch, and I actually crawled into the house, and I laid there another hour. And I thought, well, you didn't break anything, you think, because you can't feel it. And after I thawed out, I could tell, you know, I hadn't broken anything. So I got up and I went to the doctor. And the x-rays were all good. I just injured this, my elbow and my shoulder. And I jammed my arm again, the same arm I jammed before. But I survived that, but inside I really shook things up. And I've been coming back from that. And I have the referral from Dr. Webb to go back to Bartlesville Health and Rehab for balance therapy. And I had been there before for balance therapy and got to where I could walk anywhere and do most anything. And so if I hadn't have been stupid on reaching for my car door with ice and snow on the ground and standing on ice, I wouldn't have lost my balance. My feet wouldn't have slipped. And I had my fighting cane with me at that time. That's a 3/4-inch water line wrapped as a cane with a water pipe handle on the top of it I use for real stability. And it was under me. And so I just really considered myself lucky from that fall.
But you're getting around okay now.
Yeah, well, like you say, I have to be careful. I can't sit in low chairs.
Yeah.
And if I sit in low chairs, I have to have help getting up.
Yeah.
Then I have to get the circulation going back in my legs. And the doctor tells me that that will improve as I do my balance therapy. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get on that balance therapy just as soon as I can. Because I've got things I need to do and I want to do.
Well, sir, this is a very good interview. I want to thank you.
Well, I thank you. I appreciate it. And you've been a great listener, and that's encouraging to me.
Well, again, this is March 23rd, 2023. My name is Joe Todd. This has been an interview with John Fusselman in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Thank you.
Thank you.